Good afternoon. The July 10th, 2023 meeting of the WVU Faculty Senate will come to order. The minutes of the June 5th Faculty Senate meeting have been distributed as a link in your agenda. Are there any corrections or additions to the June meeting? Hearing no corrections, the minutes from the June 5th meeting are approved as written. Given the nature of today's meeting, we have slightly rearranged the typical meeting order, with the general business coming first, followed by reports from President Gee, Vice President Sharon Martin and her team, and Provost Reed. So the next item on the agenda is my report. I'd like to begin by taking a moment to thank Scott Wayne for his excellent service as chair of Faculty Senate this past academic year. Scott, we're grateful for your leadership and your calm demeanor and how you've kept a steady ship all year.
Thank you, Frankie.
I'd also like to welcome Diana Davis as chair-elect as she begins her 3-year service on the leadership team, and to acknowledge Dave Hauser as he embarks on year 2 of his current 3-year term as Senate Secretary. Finally, I'd like to welcome our new senators and thank them for their willingness to represent their faculty colleagues and serve as in this capacity. They just came from an orientation and are diving right in the deep end right away. The Faculty Senate leadership has been working diligently to represent your input and your concerns about the current budget situation and the academic transformation process. We have received many questions via email and the Faculty Senate Contact Us link, and we thank you for your engagement. To keep you informed of work conducted on your behalf, I'd like to highlight some of the activities we've been undertaking. We've been advocating for transparency in all aspects of academic transformation. I'm very pleased that the Provost's office and Rob Alsop's office have been very open in sharing information, and I hope what you saw today is an example of that, what you will see today. We've been meeting regularly with the Provost and members of her team to discuss budget issues and corrective measures, including the metrics for program portfolio review and view of the academic support units. We've begun meeting regularly with Rob Alsop to discuss review of the non-academic units, the public-private partnerships, which many of you have raised concerns about, as well as WV's debt structure. We've been advocating for severance packages for TAPS and SAP faculty who have been and will be RIF'd. We've been seeking regular updates and monitoring non-renewals and RIFs by position and college. We've been participating in the Provost Summer Work Group along with many faculty colleagues from across the university. We've been advocating for mechanisms for faculty input in the upcoming self-study process for programs and departments of review. And we've also established a new transformation budget area on the Faculty Senate website, which includes curated answers from higher administration on faculty questions, a summary of key discussion points from the summer work group meetings, and a list of resources for faculty experiencing job loss. The latter has also been added to as recently as today, if it's there yet, which is an additional 2-page highly detailed list of resources that the Provost's office has provided for faculty with those needs. In addition to our work related to academic transformation, we've now initiated a conversation regarding concerns with the WVU Code of Conduct and its inclusion since 2020 in a variety of faculty-related documents. So we'll be seeking to understand more about the history of this issue, as well as potential paths for change. Regarding the Faculty Senate meeting schedule, as previously announced, we will meet on August the 7th and August the 28th. And we'll, but for the sole purposes of focusing on academic transformation. And then our first regular face-to-face Senate meeting will occur on September 11th at the College of Law. That concludes my report. Are there any questions for me? Okay, seeing none, we'll be moving into our agenda. And I just want to remind everyone, senators may be heard by raising their hand, and they'll be recognized in the order of their hands. Non-senator observers may not be heard until first recognized by a senator. The first item on our agenda, the next item, is an item for approval. We have a resolution, which is presented in Annex 1, to urge unit leaders to seek robust faculty input in the program and department self-study process. Corey, could you share that on the screen for us?
Absolutely. Just 1 second while I relearn how to share.
So I'm going to read it. The resolution reads, whereas West Virginia University has identified a $45 million structural deficit, and whereas West Virginia University is engaging in a process of program portfolio review in response to the deficit, whereas identified programs departments under review will engage a self-study process, and whereas faculty input is critical to the operations and effective governance of said programs and programs, therefore be it resolved that the West Virginia University Faculty Senate urges unit leaders to adopt the following set of guidelines for seeking faculty input during the self-study process. 1, conduct face-to-face or virtual meetings with program department faculty to discuss the identified program department concerns and potential responses to the concerns. 2, provide, in addition, a mechanism for faculty to provide input in writing during the development of the self-study, such as via Qualtrics survey. 3, whenever possible, seek individual input from key faculty members with particular expertise in areas related to specific program department concerns. 4, provide an opportunity for program department faculty to provide edits or revisions to the draft self-study document. And 5, provide the final self-study to all department faculty at the time of submission. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
I move that we adopt this resolution.
Thank you, Diana. Is there a second?
I second, Frankie.
Thank you, Scott. So the resolution on faculty input to the program self-study process has been moved and seconded. Are there questions and discussions? Any questions and discussion? Seeing none, we will move to a vote on the resolution on faculty input to the program self-study process. All those in favor of approving the resolution on faculty input into the program self-study process, please raise your hand. 73, please lower your hands. All those opposed to the resolution on faculty input into the program self-study process, please raise your hands. Looks like none. And so the motion passes. Next, we'll hear from our Board of Governors representative. Stan Heilman is at a conference, so our recent past representative, Ashley Martucci, will provide a report from her last BOG meeting. Ashley?
Thanks, Frankie. So at our June 2023 board meeting, we had conversations, as you are well aware, about the budget. We talked a lot about the academic transformation and heard from Provost Reed and her team about the movement forward on that. We voted on a tuition and fee increase of slightly less than 3%. We also had an endorsement of the merger of the College of Creative Arts and Reed College of Media. We discussed academic transformation. We also had 5 faculty presentations from Potomac, Tech, Teaching, Research, and Service. And then we also were able to spend some time with Duncan Lorimer and Mara McLaughlin about their recent Shaw Award. So we were very excited to hear that part of the presentation. And then we also received information regarding the upcoming chair of the Board of Governors, Tanya Willis Miller, and we're excited to have her representing the board. Frankie will be at the July meeting along with Stan. So I thank you for everyone over the last 2 years and your support being on the Board of Governors. And Frankie, it's all you.
Thank you, Ashley. Any questions for Ashley? And thank you for your report, Ashley. And we'd also like to thank Ashley for her 2 years of service representing as a faculty member on the WVU Board of Governors. Thank you, Ashley. And now we'll hear a report and comments from President Gordon Gee.
Well, thank you very much. And first of all, let me just say, Frankie, welcome to your new position. And we really appreciate your taking on this role. And Scott, Wayne Scott has done a wonderful job. Has been, as you said, Frankie, he's been a solid captain in a stormy sea, and we've really appreciated that. Ashley, great works, 2 years on our Board of Governors, great service to the university, and very well done, as a matter of fact. And Frankie will be the newest member of the Board of Governors. I'm not certain, did they swear you in today, Frankie? Have you been sworn in yet?
Last Friday.
Oh, okay, well, good. So that's been taken care of. And Diana, welcome to you. So what I thought I'd do today, because of the fact that we're going to have very extensive conversations, and I thought for the new senators particularly, that I've sort of put a couple of things into context and then move on to the reports that we have. This process of transformation really started in 2015, 2016, when we realized that that the state had been reducing our budgets. As you know, the state had a significant budget deficit itself, about $400 to $500 million at least, and higher education was very much on the chopping block. So we did have budget reductions at that time, and we realized that the likelihood of us garnering increased state support was going to be fairly limited. And so what we did is we started a process of transformation. And we also started a project with the state, which we called the Freedom Agenda, and that was to get more freedom from the state to be able to control our own agenda. I can tell you that we did get a significant amount of bureaucratic relief, and for that we're grateful. But as a fact of that transformation, we have looked very carefully at a number of the non-academic programs at the institution. And I'll ask Rob Alsop later on to talk a little bit about that. But we're continuing that process. I was asked the other day, well, you're focusing on the faculty or the academic transformation. What about the non-academic? We have asked RPK to do the same thing, to lift up every program and look at it very carefully. And that will be part of this process, just so everyone to know, so that there's no area that is sacred in this regard. So one of the things that, as part of the history that we saw that over this period of time, because of the non-academic transformation, we've reduced our staff by about 500 plus people. Significant reduction in our staff. Our faculty numbers remain almost the same, and they have continued to remain fairly static right up to the point we are right now. In the meantime, our student numbers dropped by about 5,000 over that period of time, and from about 2015 on. And so those are the issues that we're dealing with right now, is three things. One, the loss of students, some of it expected, some of it unexpected. The second thing, obviously, is we actually increased our graduation rates, which is something we can all applaud, but that was clearly something that is part of our transformation process, and in a very positive way. And the third thing is that this past year, 1,000 students remained in their parents' basement. We have no idea where they are, and that was part of the issue. So there are a number of things, but the transformation process started in 2015. In 2020, I asked the provost to start taking a look at academic transformation, because I knew that we were facing a changing environment in higher education. And so that is exactly what we've been doing. And so this morning, we walked through the next phase of academic transformation. In these discussions right now, we're focusing on the academic program portfolio, its review, its realignment. But first, before I do anything more, I just want to thank the team and others who have been doing an extraordinary amount of work, and dedicated effort in this critical program. First of all, obviously the provost has done a tremendous amount in terms of moving this forward. Mark Gavin, whom you'll hear from today, he's just been incredibly important to this process. Lou Slimak, Paul Kreider, Lisa Castellino-Gurgich. I want to acknowledge our deans for the excellent work that they are doing and the role that they've been playing in this process that we're in right now. And I want to acknowledge the faculty leadership, the people that you're seeing right now. We have had continuing discussions, as Frankie and Scott can tell you, we have a continuing process of discussion. They meet with the provost. They're now starting to meet with Rob Alsop. We've been meeting for 9 years regularly, and it's been very helpful to me. So I want you to know that I appreciate that. I want also on this meeting or on this Zoom meeting today, we have Katie Hagan, who is our consulting partner from the RPK group. I'm going to have a chance to meet Katie, who has been incredibly helpful in working with the data and helping us follow best practices. And I think that is important. I also want to acknowledge that this is a difficult time. Let me just say that again. I know very well that this is a difficult time and a challenging time for our university. I see it, I feel it, I understand it, and I sense it every day. But this process, though difficult, I will tell you is necessary, and the data will show that. As you know, we have followed that notion of transparency and data-driven and data responsible, and that's what we're doing right now. I'll just say a couple of other things, Frankie. First of all, we've talked many times about how the landscape of higher education is changing. It is changing dramatically. It is changing in a very fast-forward way, and we need to understand where we need to change so that we can invest and grow. I was just I mentioned this morning that I went with the state leadership to visit Amazon and Microsoft. And as I mentioned this morning, our competitors are no longer the University of Kentucky or the University of Kansas or whatever. Our competitors are Amazon and Microsoft, as they are starting their own universities, as they're starting their own programs, and those are going to be enormously challenging to all universities, but we need to be very cognizant of that. And the other thing is that we talk about the fact that we have a budget deficit. We do. So do a lot of other institutions. Ours is kind of in the middle of those. If you think of Penn State as having about 300 million, you think about some of the others. Kansas State is about 65 million. Kansas was about 100 million. We're in sort of that middle level, but nonetheless, it is a deficit. But I don't think about it as a deficit. I think about it as the fact that we do have to reduce what we're doing. We have to be more effective and efficient, but we have to also increase our quality. And so I've always viewed this process we're going through as an investment strategy. And I've stated that on a number of occasions. I know people roll their eyes sometimes, but it is an investment strategy. It's an investment in our future. But I do recognize and empathize that this means, of course, in a process that we're going to lose some personnel as a result. As I said, we have lost over 550 staff members. And this is not easy. This is not easy for any of us. And none of us take any pleasure in anything that results in the loss of any of our colleagues. But we are seeing every day that our student needs are different. The family experience is different. The family expectations have changed. I spoke almost every day to the new student orientation, and I get a lot of different questions about timing, about financial issues. We have students who now apply to 9 or 10 institutions, and they negotiate with each of us as to which is going to be the better package. It's a different world, something I have not seen, but we now have to deal with it. So we have to serve our students, our communities, our states, as a land-grant university, much differently than we did even 10 years ago when I joined the university. But it's pretty simple. And I'll say this to everyone: we need to understand that. We need to accept that. We need to quickly adapt to remain a relevant and vital university in this really post-pandemic world. So we've identified programs for formal review, but all programs. I say this, and I really appreciate the resolution that you put forward as a faculty senate, because all programs should review what they are doing and ask themselves if they are meeting the needs of future students and the needs of industry, the needs of our state. We must ask ourselves, are we presenting the very best educational and experiential opportunity for our students? I understand that this is a difficult question because it requires all of us to think differently about what we're doing, but change is hard. But we must change ourselves or we will be changed by someone else. And I can see that happening. I can see that happening in so many different places, whether it be Florida, whether it be New York, whether it be Ohio. There are all of these legislative changes, some of them due to political issues, but many of them due to a lack of support for higher education. And I'd rather be in control of our destiny than be victimized by it. And so I realize that we are moving fast. I've always said that speed is our friend. I believe that because we will then be able to squeeze the fear out of what we're doing as quickly as we can. Then we can get on about our business of growing and moving forward. So I don't want to delay any decisions any longer than we have to. So, I'm sorry to take so long, but this is a pivotal moment for the university. It's an existential challenge for higher education. I can see it in so many different ways. We can now begin to make decisions by using the data to determine where we need to improve, where we need to change, where we need to invest. And as we go through this process, I encourage everyone to keep in mind our first principles. Let me just remind everyone, are we putting our students first? Are we being fiercely land grant? Are we returning to our roots? Are we believing in our land grant mission? And does what we're doing make a difference? And is it different enough to be able to be attractive and substantive as an educational opportunity? So right now, I can't say anything more to any of you than that we need to meet this moment head on. We can either give all the reasons that we shouldn't do this, or we can have the results of having done something which really does make a difference. So I'm really honored to be working with all of you, but I am very committed to the process that we're engaged in, and I look forward to hearing questions that others may have. But Frankie, sorry about that. But Frankie, what I would say is I will reserve right to answer any questions as we get into the question period, if that's all right with you.
Thank you. We can take questions now for you if you'd like, President Gee.
I prefer to wait if that's all right.
Prefer to wait? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so next we have a report from Sharon Martin, Vice President for University Relations and Enrollment Management, George Zimmerman, Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Management, and Joy Carr, Director of University Advising, to discuss recruitment and retention efforts. Sharon.
All right, great. Thank you, Frankie, and thank you for excuse me, inviting us to join you today. I know George has a PowerPoint, so I'm going to see if you can share that for us. There we go. Now we got the first slide, George. Perfect. All right. You want to flip to the second one, though? And we'll walk through what we're going to talk about today. So this afternoon, we're going to provide everyone with some background on the current state of enrollment, as well as an update on recruitment and retention strategies. And we'll also be sharing how everyone can engage as we move forward. When we talk about enrollment, many often think first-time freshman recruitment, and that is a very important piece of enrollment, but it is just one piece. Retention and persistence are equally important. It's much more expensive to recruit a new student than it is to retain current students. So we really want to make sure that we're managing both parts of that. When we think about enrollment, we definitely want to be aggressive in identifying new markets and strategies to recruit students, but we do need to be equally passionate about working with our teams to retain our students as well. And I think back to when we repositioned our university brand, I've always said that all of us are brand ambassadors. Every interaction a person has with the university, no matter the role, reflects the values and the personality of our institution. And when it comes to enrollment, I would add that all of us are also recruiters. Whether you're meeting with a prospective student or teaching a current one, the interactions and guidance that we have reinforces their decision to come here and or stay here. So know that we appreciate the work that you do every day and how much that does influence a student's decision to be at WVU. And as we go through the presentation, you'll see there are several ways for you to continue to engage and help recruit and retain students to the university. And with that, I'll turn it over to George to go through the deck. George.
Oh, thank you, Sharon. And thank you everyone for allowing me some time to talk with you today a little bit about where we're at. We've heard a lot about the environment. Dr. Gee just spoke a little bit about the challenges that we're facing in higher education. We hear a lot about demographics. So I'm going to go through a little bit about where we're at from a high level perspective and what are some of the challenges that not just WVU, but all institutions are facing right now. And then talking a little bit more then about what we're doing to address those challenges, because this is something that I think has most definitely been accelerated due to the COVID-19 pandemic and has caused some unique challenges for higher education. But it's something, as Dr. Gee has mentioned, has been around for many years in one way, shape, or form. And it's definitely something that we have been looking at and planning for, and now need to really step up efforts and move quickly and swiftly in order to make sure that we are achieving our goals. So in terms of the national landscape, students have applied to more schools than any other year. Average number of schools that students have applied to is 9. And so what schools are seeing across the nation is more applications, but there are not more students. There are students throwing in applications at more institutions. And so it's become much more competitive in terms of the recruitment of students to individual institutions. Admissions are up at many large public schools. We saw that. Our admissions were up over 6% this year in terms of students admitted to the university. And it's due to an influx of applicants. So students have more options. So they are getting into more institutions and therefore have a wider range of selection. They are looking at things like financial aid packages. They're looking at course offerings. They're attending multiple orientations that we have seen and comparing school to school and negotiating with institutions as to who can give them the best opportunity, the best deal in some cases from a financial perspective. And this is most definitely something that has happened in the past to a smaller extent, but is really accelerated, particularly in the past few years. Our visits have shifted. And this is important because it really ties into how we can really engage students and show our uniqueness, especially from the academic and faculty side. And they're focused really so much on the admitted student experience. So they're waiting until they get into a school before they actually even come to do that school in person. Some of that's proliferation of new virtual tours and opportunities that many institutions implemented during COVID. We had our virtual tour well before COVID. We've always been a destination school, so we had to find ways to attract students and convince them to come see us in a lot of cases. But they really want individualized engagement and attention when they're on campus. And that can be difficult for large numbers of visitors when you're bringing them on campus. And so thinking about new ways and unique ways we can engage with students on campus is going to be more important than ever over the next few years. Affordability is and always has been one of the top considerations for families in the college search and beyond. This goes into retention efforts as well as persistence efforts as students continue to move towards getting their degree and continue their education. We're always concerned about, are we financially affordable for students, not only to make that initial decision, but then also to continue for all 4 years. And then our college going rate and demographics are a concern. And this is something for the entire industry. When I say demographics, it's more so than just the students who are graduating from high school and birth rates, but it has to do with engagement with going into college and what are those other options, because there are many of other options that are out there. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then some of the things that we're doing to combat that. So we've talked about national trends a lot, and you've heard this from a lot of different people at the university, and I'm going to give you the enrollment management lens on this. So this is data from the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, which is the industry standard for admissions professionals to use in terms of predicting high school enrollments through the next pretty much decade and into 2039 and beyond. And what we can see here is that nationally, there's a little bit of a bump that goes into 2025 and then things drop down. These numbers are inflated by the South, particularly Texas, in terms of the numbers of growth, and some pockets in the country that are growing in terms of demographics. Despite being in the Big 12 and having a great presence in Texas through our alumni groups in both Dallas and Houston, and having a regional recruiter there for many years, we do not draw a lot of students from Texas. And our main area is regionally in the Northeast. And the Northeast has remained fairly flat from year to year. And so we've seen things go pretty much flat through the past few years for recruitment, and then a slight little bump going into next year before things precipitously go down and start aligning more what we saw before the early 2000s. When we take a look at West Virginia, we see a very different story. Now, this is 50% of our student population. In terms of our incoming students, this is about 40% of our incoming population. These are significant numbers for us. And we've been on a steady decline since 2019 in terms of the number of students that are available for high school graduates. We see a slight little bump that recovers to an average diploma count going into 24 and 25, and then a precipitous drop, which is significantly lower than we have seen in the state in history. So we really need to be thinking about what is happening with our in-state population and what are our opportunities to engage our West Virginia students in higher education. Additional demographic challenges: a rising number of non-consumers. These are students who are not going to college. These are students who are entering either the workforce. The job market has been very strong and continues to be strong in a lot of places. We see them engaging in other types of credentialing, as was mentioned earlier. So pursuing opportunities where you do not need a college degree to even get an interview. Companies like Apple, Amazon, and many other large Fortune 100 corporations have now moved into not requiring college degrees for a number of positions that they post and that are available, because they do have their own education systems built into their and trainings built into their on-campus programs for their work programs. We have one of the lowest college going rates in the country, and we saw that population is growing. So we have a combined almost double challenge that we're going to be facing moving into the next decade and beyond in the state of West Virginia. Our competitive set of schools changed, and it changed during the pandemic. And that is something that was really is going to pose some challenges for us in a lot of different ways, and ways that we need to think differently and outside the box with who are our competitive set. And what we know is that low-income and first-generation college students are less likely to attend any form of post-secondary education. And when we look at the state of West Virginia, we have a large portion, and our incoming class is actually a large proportion of first-generation college students. So this is another concern for us from a demographic perspective. So it's not just the number of students who are graduating high school, but it's what activities are they going to be engaged in post-graduation, and what are some of the other environmental challenges that they're facing from a demographic perspective that may inhibit them from going to college, that we need to be thinking about from an enrollment perspective. What we do know is that over the past 10 years, and this is some information from the Educational Advisory Board, is that the biggest challenge for WVU has been the college going rate, not only in the state of West Virginia, but also nationally. Nationally, the college going rate has dropped by about 5% over the past few years, past 6 years. In the state of West Virginia, we've seen a 10% drop over a similar time frame. And so the college going rate is more of a challenge than anything else. And so what we kind of see in these numbers here is that from straight demographics, we only lost 198 students. We lost 1,332 over this time period because of college going rate changes. The reason why we don't have an incoming class of 3,000 students is because our market share shifted and we gained market share. So we got more students from other places. And this was done by taking a look at our traditional recruitment areas and doing analysis on the factors that we just talked about. And so we grew outside of market. We got more students from areas that we didn't traditionally get them from. And we grew our percentage of market share in the state of West Virginia in order to offset the overall loss of students through college going rate and other demographic changes. The competitive set has changed for us. When I came to WVU 7 years ago, this list was completely different. Penn State and Pitt, who was not available when we drew this data down from the National Student Clearinghouse, were always #1 and #2. But beyond that, what we would see is that we were competing with in-state students for their in-state flagship and their regional institution. What we see now is that we are competing with national brands in our primary market. And so the competitive landscape changed. University of Alabama, University of Tennessee, University of Kentucky. We are not losing Kentucky students to the University of Kentucky. I know that because we don't enroll a large number of Kentucky students. What we are losing are other non-resident students from Virginia, from Maryland, from Pennsylvania, from Ohio to Kentucky. And so we are in a different, I always say we're fighting in a different weight class than we used to, because we're not competing against the, just the IUPs and the Slippery Rocks and those in Western Pennsylvania for those in-state students. But we've lost more students in New Jersey to Alabama than we have to Rutgers. And so those are some things that we really need to be thinking about as we're looking at our competition and from a recruitment standpoint. And last but not least, I just wanted to show this graph because I think it's jarring, but it's a reality of the college going rate in the state of West Virginia. Our overall college going rate is 45.9%, which means of those, what will be only 14,000 students in the next 15 years, only 45% of those will be going to college. When we look at low-income students, and they are low socioeconomic status, which is partial or full Pell eligibility as defined by the Higher Education Policy Commission, is just over 30%, which means the majority of students are not going to college. These are many of the counties in the state of West Virginia. And that makes it very challenging for us, and it'll be very challenging for other in-state institutions to meet their enrollment goals from just looking at West Virginia students if we don't do something to address some of these unique challenges that we have. And so from a recruitment planning perspective, to give you a recap of what we have done over the past year, our regional recruitment team, we have 13 regional recruiters that are situated through West Virginia and across the country. They did over 900 school appointments and college fairs, 148 in-market information sessions, panels, change of campus and counselor events. They logged 20,000 communications, and we logged over 50,000 outgoing communications through our student call center and with student ambassador representatives. Our Vanity account receives 400 to 600 emails per week that our team is answering routinely. We make it a point to attend as many West Virginia awards and college decision days across the state as we can. This is also another great area where if you love to go to high schools and watch people get scholarships, we would love for people to volunteer for these. They're great and amazing ways for us to be able to celebrate someone's, our state coming to WVU. And we do multiple virtual options throughout the cycle for students, parents, and counselors. So virtual didn't go away. We ended up taking everything that we learned from the COVID-19 pandemic that worked from a recruitment perspective and enhanced that along with our in-person programming here on campus when we restarted that. And I think New Student Orientation is a great example. We do partially part of that hybrid and the other part of it in person. At 4,300 students that are attending in-person programming for New Student Orientation. We had 275 there today. It was very busy in the Mountain Lair. For those of you who are downtown and were complaining about the traffic, that's my fault. Because we really did a great job, I think, of bringing the students back here on campus, and they are overwhelmingly supportive of that. But advising and other aspects of the program remained online because those experiences were beneficial in a lot of ways for students and allowed us to do things differently and to think differently from a recruitment perspective. So some new recruitment strategies that will address these issues that I think are important for us to talk about. And remember, in Dr. Gee's State of the University address, he talked about the West Virginia University Pledge Scholarship Program that specifically addresses our in-state students who are promise eligible with a 0 EFC. So these are full Pell students. They receive the Promise Award from the state. They receive our in-state scholarships as well. But we added an additional pledge for them, which is that we will cover their cost of room and meals so that they can attend West Virginia University and remove the food insecurity and the housing insecurity that those students face. That is a barrier for students to attend WVU or any college. This is a reality for students who are living in that range in terms of the estimated family contribution. They're typically at or below the poverty level. And this is a way for us to provide additional support so that they can come here and be successful. This year, it was launched, in the spring term. So we did not have an opportunity to market it to a lot of the communities, but we have over 70 students enrolled in this program right now. And we were hoping to have over 100 in this program next year. And so this is a way for us to really try to increase this and create a community of students that can support each other in a very new way to be a transformational institution like we know that we are. We redesigned our entire scholarship program for fall of 24. We had 2 scholarship programs, one for test optional students and one for students who submitted test scores. This was implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we implemented the test optional scholarship program in less than 30 days. And that was an incredible feat. And we did not want to shake it up too much until we decided what we were doing in terms of test optional admissions policies and what we could do for our students. We've now combined those programs. We've simplified it. It is very easy for students to understand what they will pay to come to WVU. It's the first time I think I've been able to say that in about 5 years. We know that finances are important to students. And so we now have 4 levels. 3 of them do not require a test score. The top level requires a test score. We can communicate upon admissions exactly what a student will be receiving for merit awards. And so we know that that's going to be a benefit for us from a recruitment perspective and help us to attract more students to the university. We work with EAB for a Cultivate Student Engagement campaign. This is a marketing campaign to over 250,000 prospective sophomores and juniors. This is to help build that top of funnel, as we talked about before. So the admissions funnel starts big at the top and gets small at the bottom. And we need to continue to grow that interest from our sophomores and our juniors to get more applications. We can't convert a student if they never apply. And so we're working with EAB to identify them both from a geographic perspective, but then also through program-specific marketing, as well as areas that we know that we have strengths in from a university perspective. Our student experience modernization project. This is part of the larger modernization projects, but is specifically focused on our Salesforce CRM that is used by all students who apply to the university, both the Morgantown campus, online, and Kaiser and Beckley campuses. We are re-implementing the entire Salesforce instance to create a more streamlined experience for our students, to allow us to implement Marketing Cloud, which will improve our communications to our students from a marketing perspective and create a fully seamless experience for our students and our staff who are working with students in a recruitment environment. This is going to be very important for us to have effective communications to students as we move forward. And this will be a year-long project. It kicks off on the 17th in terms of the implementation phase, and will be in place for fall of 2024 application cycle, fall 25 incoming class. We've implemented an extended state strategy. This takes the Ohio Reciprocity Program, which many of you may be familiar with, but there are certain programs that are in Ohio Reciprocity where students receive a discounted tuition rate to attend the university from Ohio. And we've worked with the Provost's office as well as finance and enrollment SWAT to extend those programs into 4 additional states. And so we've extended them out into Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And the reason being is we know that we need to grow our market. We need to grow our market share. All of those states had interest in the programs that were in Ohio Reciprocity. But the yield rate on those programs were significantly lower than what we saw from Ohio. And so by entering into the extended state strategy, our hope is that we will begin to achieve a yield rate similar to what we see in Ohio. And last but not least, we're going to be working with ACRA, which is the American Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers, on a long-term enrollment management plan that includes recruitment and taking a look at, I think, constructively, all the things that we're doing from a recruitment perspective and onboarding perspective of our first-time freshman students. They are a nonprofit organization. If anyone's familiar with ACRA, we are an ACRA school. West Virginia ACRA runs our college fairs throughout the state. And so they really come in with an unbiased opinion as to what we're doing well and what we might not be doing well from in these aspects and how we can better align things. And they will complement everything that's going on that we've talked about through the past few months. They're not here to do anything other than provide advice and help us to better guide the recruitment and enrollment side of all of the transformation work that we're doing as well. I dumped a lot of information at you, and now I'm going to turn it over to Joy. Well, I'm going to talk a little about faculty engagement, then I'm going to turn it over to Joy. I was on vacation last week, so forgive me. I'm still a little vacation brain. But some things that faculty can do. Partner with our college recruiters. Every college has a recruitment team that's associated with them. We meet monthly with them. Kim McCarty with the regional recruitment team meets with them regularly to talk about tactical efforts that they can make and how we can help recruit students to your individual colleges and programs. I also meet with them through the Key Recruiters group monthly as well. Where I provide high-level updates on the enrollment funnel and where we're at as a university. Being a destination school, the more we can engage with these students when they're on campus prior to them enrolling, the more we can show that we have a small school feel, but big school resources. And I think that's really important for us from an enrollment perspective. Proactive outreach. I can't tell you how much this means to our students when they receive handwritten note cards, follow-up phone calls and information after visits, all of these things that seem like they're small, but they're not. I know Dr. Gee gets a list from us and he will be on the phone calling students. I know a lot of the assistant deans do as well. Valerie Lastinger in the Eberly College is famous for her notes and even finding students in local papers and congratulating them on their articles and things like that. So students come to campus with those and say, this is why I came to WVU, because I'm a person here. I'm not a number. And I thought I would be a number. And that's really important to a student, especially Gen Z student, to feel like they're seen, recognized, and that we are engaging with them in a very special way. And then enhance experiential learning opportunities and share those stories with us. We did a differentiation workshop with EAB for enrollment SWOT. And one of the things that came up as one of the strengths of WVU is the way that we engage students with content, not just in the classroom, but in unique and different ways where they're applying knowledge and not just taking tests. And that is something that students love. It is something they are looking for. It is something that we do incredibly well in a lot of different ways already. And the more we can share those stories and the more that you can get those to me and to Tony Dobies and others in the marketing team, the more that your individual college recruiters, the more we can showcase and highlight the great work that the faculty are doing in the classroom and the way that the students are engaging and make WVU desirable and really kind of seal that deal from a value proposition when we're working with students. Joy, I'm going to turn it over to you. And you can just tell me how to progress through your slides, because as we talked about, it's not just about recruitment, but once they're here, which is the one of the hurdles of getting them through the door, it's also about getting them back out the other door with a degree.
That's exactly right. Once they're here, we want them to stay, right?
And graduate.
Yes, and graduate, right? Not just
Joy, if I could, this is wonderful, and we have a big giant presentation coming after you all, so we'd appreciate conciseness. Thank you.
Absolutely. I was going to say I have fewer slides than George and even fewer minutes. So I would love to talk more about this with anyone who is interested. I'm available by email, or I can meet you for coffee or what have you and talk about these things. I do want to add, when we talk about retention, what we are talking about specifically is freshmen, right? The freshman retention from incoming year to do they come back to us the next year? Everything else is called persistence. And this information comes from a variety of student surveys and other sorts of projects designed to gather what students are struggling with, what they're doing well in, and those projects are based out of that. So several years ago, we had a particularly impactful survey called the STAY survey. Parents and students were surveyed, and that revealed a lot of good information to us, things that students are still struggling with, which will come as no surprise, such as balancing school with their other responsibilities, and new issues such as the increase in what are called student contemplators, meaning those students who aren't really sure if they're going to stay or not, and they're considering stopping out or quitting college altogether. So the survey provided us with a great deal of information that we have used to make certain decisions on it and create projects and programs aimed at student retention and success. And I'll show you some of those. George, if you'll advance the slide, please. What you'll see is, and I won't go over all of these obviously, but these initiatives were broken down into 5 buckets, if you will. And I'm sure faculty will remember course optimization and the pulling of courses on grid and making sure we were offering courses at particular times, in particular times of the week, et cetera, bringing labs on grid and that sort of thing. That was in response to the #1 reason why students were leaving WVU a few years ago, and that was because they couldn't get into key courses in their schedule. So that's an example of a way in which we've collaborated with faculty to try to optimize the student experience and retain students here at WVU. One other I will point out is under #5, and that's the early alerts. We have faculty who teach what are considered critical gateway courses. So those courses that are typically prerequisites or sequenced courses, think math, chemistry, sociology 101, English 101, things that students have to take typically or that act as prerequisites to something else. And those instructors will often participate in the early alert program so that students are getting at the 4-week mark an indication of how they're doing in class. So they don't have to wait till mid-semester to figure out if they need to take advantage of some other resources. And more importantly, advisors and other community members here at the university can see that as well and create campaigns to step in and target those sorts of things. So that's just an example of some of the initiatives that came out of these studies. George, if you'll advance one more time, please. In terms of engagement, what we have found to be the most successful in partnering with faculty are places where faculty are able to take a look at how to change up communication with students, meeting them where they are academically, and then integrating some of the things the university offers in terms of support into their courses. I'll give you 2 very quick examples. The University Experience course, WVU Experience, the 191 orientation courses, many of them will partner an instructor with an advisor, or the advisor is the one who teaches the course. They bring in speakers into the course, people who are in charge of important resources to make those connections with students and help them find their fit here, not just academically, but across the entire university. We also have instructors, faculty members who work with what are considered high DFW courses. So students who tend to withdraw at higher rates or not earn a passing grade at higher rates. And having really taken a look at why that might be, one of our best examples is Economics 201. There was a lot of work the instructor, the coordinator of that course put into it. And those DFW rates have turned around because of the research and the collaboration with that faculty member. The third thing I want to highlight on this slide just reiterates something that George has said about participating in the recruiting events. I cannot tell you enough how valuable that relationship with the department actually is to the family who is visiting. Our recruiters, that's not to undersell what they do. They do an immensely powerful job of explaining what the programs are capable of, but you can just tell the difference to the family when they get to meet someone in the department working on that project or with that special class and actually having a conversation about what it would be like to be in that department. It makes all the difference in the world. So those are just some of the things that faculty have been contributing to help our retention. And then my very last slide, I think my graph slide is gone, but that's unfortunate because it was very positive. So our retention has been increasing over the past few years. We did take a little bit of a hit during COVID for obvious reasons. Last year, we were at 79% retention, meaning 79% of the incoming freshmen who started with us that year came back to us the following fall, and we're still waiting on the most recent classes numbers. We won't have them until October, but we're thinking that first number is going to start with an 8, and we're all debating what the second one is going to be, but it's probably going to top out around 80% or so. So we're on the way up, and the 20-year trend is up. Our graduation rates are up. These are all very good things. And once again, I know you have a packed agenda, so if there are other things that you would like to talk to me about with these projects, I'm more than happy to talk to you about them at some other point.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Sharon, George, and Joy. And I'm sorry to have expedited you a tad. Any questions for Sharon, George, and Joy? Yes, Kelly Watson.
I just have a question about how the upcoming RIF and the cuts are going to affect sort of how we market to students and how we recruit.
In terms of the program specific, Kelly?
Well, and in terms of how stories about WVU's cuts, like how the press about WVU is being perceived by prospective students.
Sure. And that's something that, I'll let Sharon weigh in on as well, but it is definitely something that our recruitment team, has had discussions about. But, there's always, I think, positive and, things that we can talk about specifically around the investment that we're going to be making in the students and how we're going to be helping them moving forward in a lot of different ways. Sharon, I know there's specific things that you've called out and talked about with our team at All Team and key recruiters and communicators as well.
Yeah, thank you, George. So we will be continuing to focus our message on the student first. And although we don't know how everything will play out, what we will do is continue to share those stories of how the faculty and the program and the university is setting every student up for success. So we will always focus on that and make sure that the students understand what the university is going to do to support them and help them through their academic journey. And as Dr. Gee mentioned earlier, today was a pivotal moment when we began to really think about what is it that we're going to invest in? What is it that we're going to be known for? And that's what we'll continue to market as we go into the next recruitment cycle.
Thank you all. I appreciate that report. Just a reminder to senators, when you are recognized, please state your full name and your college. Okay, at this point, next on our agenda is Provost Marianne Reed and her team to discuss programs for further study, metrics, and self-study process. Provost Reed.
Thank you very much, Frankie. And good afternoon, everyone. As many of you know, we had our campus conversation earlier today in which members of my team shared the results of our accelerated program portfolio review process. The deans and chairs of the departments or academic units identified for further or formal review have been notified of the next steps, and we've now made our data files available to everyone, accessible through the Office of the Provost's Academic Transformation website. For today's meeting, and as part of my Provost report to the Senate, my team will be presenting briefly 2 topics for discussion so that we can save the remainder of our time for Q&A, because we know there are a lot of questions and a lot of data was shared earlier today. So first of all, Lou Slimak from our office will be presenting our process for reviewing the JEF curriculum, which we believe we must undertake as part of our transformation efforts. And then secondly, Mark Gavin and Katie Hagan from RPK will provide a recap of the program portfolio review process and the results, but will not go into the level of detail that was provided this morning in the campus conversation. Again, we want to allow time for questions. I would ask that you save your questions for the end of both presentations and that you focus your questions on the program portfolio review and the Jeff review, given that we will have a limited time to spend with you today. But there will be other members of my team and the senior leadership team available on standby to answer other questions. And then there will be other opportunities and venues beyond this meeting today for you had to have your questions answered. So I'm going to begin by handing it over to Lou Slimak, our Associate Provost for Curriculum and Assessment, to talk about the Jeff.
So this summer, the General Education Foundations Program, the JEF, will undergo a Board of Governors program review per BOG Rule 2.2. We're going to perform this program review in anticipation of concerns that are almost certain to be raised during WVU's upcoming comprehensive reaffirmation of its accreditation with the Higher Learning Commission, as well as to address and resolve issues related to instructional efficiency and curricular redundancy that we are already seeing emerge given the coming change to WVU's revenue model. This program review is being performed to help meet 4 goals that were established with a faculty senate work group which met with me and the Associate Provost of Undergraduate Education, Evan Witters, over most of academic year 22-23. The goals for the particular review are on the screen, and you can see what they are: to make the JEF more marketable, new student audiences, to increase undergraduate enrollment, to focus on skills and knowledge that are relevant and contemporary, to ensure meaningful assessment of the learning of those skills and student success in the GEF, to be equitable and efficient in the distribution of courses and sections across academic units with consideration of the new budget model, and to meaningfully include and encourage experiential and service learning and other kinds of learning, like George said, that our students enjoy, that are sometimes not degree pursuant and not covered by financial aid. These goals are broad, and part of what the program review is hoping to accomplish is to bring more specificity to these goals. They are also aimed at a revision of the existing GEF program, not the development of a new general education program at this time. Additionally, as that work group met with me and Evan over the past academic year, the group made a list of additional considerations that we will try and resolve, the most pressing which are clarifying the expectations for GEF courses, clarifying the expectations for GEF faculty, clarifying the roles and responsibilities of faculty senate, the academic units in the provost's office, and the design, delivery, and the assessment of the GEF and any general education program, and ensuring scheduling accessibility across Morgantown campuses, WVU's other locations, and across a range of days, times, and modalities. I bounce in between screens, so beg your pardon. The program self-study will be completed by the Provost's Office in consultation with the RPK group to assure best practices in the selection and use of metrics and analyses. There will be a review of that self-study that's made available to the Faculty Senate leadership before it is submitted. Requests to make edits to that self-study or provide additional information about the GEF can be made at that time. The expectation, again, is that the recommendations from the Board of Governors resulting from this program review will result in a set of specific actions to the GEF that a new task force will then be asked to realize over academic year 23-24 for implementation sometime during academic year 24-25. Last year's work group also agreed on the composition of that task force that would carry out this work. The primary stakeholders who will be responsible for this work include representatives from the Faculty Senate, the academic departments, the Registrar's Office, and the Provost's Office. But we will also seek input in the process and after the process from other key stakeholders, and those include but are not limited to academic advisors, dean's offices, recruitment and enrollment management, the financial aid office, and undergraduate students. Once a formal set of recommendations is received from the Board of Governors and published early this fall, the Provost's Office will reach out to representatives from the primary stakeholder groups in early fall to formally convene that task force and begin its work. And that's all from me.
And now I'm going to introduce or hand it over to Mark Gavin, our Associate Provost of Budget, Facilities, and Strategic Initiatives, and Katie Hagan from RPK, our partner in this effort, to speak in general about the process, the metrics used, and next steps. So Mark, Gavin, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Marianne. As Marianne suggested, and in the interest of saving time for Q&A, I'm not going to represent what was done at Campus Conversation earlier today around program portfolio review and realignment. I'm assuming many of you saw it. If you didn't, a recording of it should be posted shortly. I just really want to hit some of the highlights, and I'll try and keep that to a handful of minutes, like less than 5. To begin the review process, we chose metrics that matter, metrics that are fundamental. Enrollment and enrollment trends are indicative of student demand. This is not us telling students what they can and can't take. This is students showing us what they are interested in by way of majors. Where enrollment's low or it's dropping, especially at a quicker rate than the overall university, we need to pay attention to this and think about what it means. And we need to look at the larger unit as a collection of programs and personnel, among other things, to understand how it is doing in managing its resources as it delivers on its instructional and other missions. At a fundamental level, student credit hour production, faculty FTE trends, and financial performance help us paint that picture and helps us think more holistically about a unit and its portfolio of programs. It is admittedly not a complete picture, and the formal review process is meant to help bring context to those metrics and a broader understanding of the unit. In short, these metrics don't tell the whole story, but they capture an important part of it. Layer onto that are 3 additional lenses, specifically the R1 research lens, state priority programs, and areas of distinction and differentiation. And we feel comfortable in identifying those units and programs that we would like to more closely examine through the formal review process. Now, following the formal review process per BOG Rule 2.2, this allows for a range of possible outcomes ultimately. These include continuance at the current level of activity, continuance at the current level of activity with specific action, continuance at a reduced level of activity, development of a cooperative program, and discontinuance. To be clear, nothing is presumed by way of outcomes. We will likely see recommendations from across this range. We do understand that the tendency is to focus on the negative, but the reality is that even with 47% of our programs identified for further review, the majority will not be discontinued, and that is worth emphasizing. Within this number are healthy programs that have been included simply because we are looking at the unit in a holistic fashion. But undoubtedly, some of those programs, if not many, could be delivered more efficiently. And that is the point of looking at a unit and its delivery of its portfolio of programs in a holistic fashion. This positions the units and college to have latitude in managing its resources, but that must be done with both effectiveness and efficiency in mind. And even with 48% of our faculty associated with units that have programs under review, we are not going to cut 48% of our faculty, far from it. And this is also worth emphasizing. We do have to find efficiencies, and that does mean some reductions in personnel, but the majority of our faculty will remain in position. Above all, we need to remain focused on our students. And you've heard this from President Gee, from Sharon, and from George, and from Provost Reed. And we'll continue to do that. Discontinued majors will be taught out. We're not going to leave students in a lurch. And we'll continue to help students find majors within our portfolio of programs. More than that, we'll continue to build a portfolio of programs that speaks to student interests, employer needs, and industry demand. The data will help us get there, as will recovered and redeployed resources. As for the timeline, deans and leaders of those units with programs identified for further review were informed of their status this morning, and notification of the impacted faculty and staff has already started and should be completed within the next day. Self-study reports from those units are due by August 1st. Importantly, this process requires participation from the faculty and relevant staff in completing the self-study. Preliminary recommendations will be sent to colleges and units on August 11th. And then an appeals window opens up between August 21st and September 5th, in which appeals of those initial recommendations can be registered and heard. The Board of Governors will vote on final recommendations on September 15th, and any faculty and staff impacted by reduction recommendations will be notified by October 16th. Now, going back to the metrics, their definitions, and the data underlying them, these are now available on the Provost website, which was identified during the campus conversation this morning. We're hosting a few data drop-in sessions this Thursday and Friday for those who want to learn more and ask questions about the data and metrics. Zoom links to those drop-in sessions should be provided in tomorrow's e-news. And finally, I'd like to note that we'll continue to update the data as needed, field questions, and make corrections where required. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Katie Hagan. She's our lead RPK partner, and she's going to walk you through the data set that sits on the Provost website. The intent here isn't to highlight and address specific programs or units, but rather to familiarize you with how that data set is structured and how you might navigate it for those who are interested in doing so. And with that, I'll turn it over to Katie.
Thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can look through some things together. I'm going to be talking through 3 tabs. I'll start with the Provost Academic Transformation website, where everything that Mark just spoke about is available to you all. So all of the comments he just made are captured here on this website under the process area description. Also reflects the conversation that we had this morning, as well as the timeline. In this gray box off to the side here, this is new information that was published today. So there's a couple of different links. I'll talk through 2 of them specifically. The first is the data table, and the asterisk at the end of this data table is referring to the comment right here at the bottom of the table, which Mark also just explained, which is that we are taking feedback on this. We want to hear your questions. We want to understand, where we can be clearer, where we can do any sort of refinement. We will finalize this data set on July 14th and republish it, along with any updates to the data file. We'll be sure to be clear about those, make that in a written document, as well as record a new video explaining any changes that may have happened in the data set. Specifically, we already know the School of Medicine, there are some updates to be made on the revenue side for that particular analysis. So that is expected to change between now and the end of the week. The second document I want to show you is the data definition. So this is linked in that gray box. All of the items in bold refer to elements within the data table that I will talk through in just a second, but just wanted to make you aware that they are here, just in case you're looking at the table and wondering, where's the definition for this particular thing. They're all listed in this 2-page document right here. We tried to keep it as concise as possible and give notes where relevant. But again, this is a great opportunity. If you review and still have questions, please do let us know, and we'll continue to refine this to make it as clear as possible. And the last thing I'll walk us through, and I'll go through this in a little bit more detail, is the table itself. So admittedly, when you open this, it looks very small. So I've zoomed way in to make sure that we can talk through it piece by piece and answer any questions that you all have about the data definitions themselves. Naturally, we'll be looking at one particular department as we scroll through this because it's there, but I'll be speaking about the metrics in more definitional terms and not focusing on any one unit as we go through this. So on the table, we have highlighted in green when something is a priority program for the state. So this has been defined within your state resource allocation model, that for each institution in West Virginia, there are programs that are specifically identified as being of priority and have implications for your budget model. So we've highlighted those to make sure that people are aware of them. They're also commented on in the narratives that the units under review would have received today. The first section in this yellow color here is focusing on program enrollment data. And it refers to the programs that are listed on the left-hand side of the table within the department. So in this particular example, Animal and Nutritional Sciences has 3 programs listed, and we've calculated these metrics for the programs across all of the programs in this particular department. So the first metric we have is the fall 2018 to 2021 median enrollment. This is an unduplicated count. We received feedback this morning that a duplicated count would be preferable. So we'll be working on updating that this week. The second column you see is the fall 22 enrollment. So this is just a flat capture of how many students were enrolled in the programs in the fall of 2022. The third column is a numerical difference between the first 2 columns. So between the median of 2018 to 2021 and the fall of 2022, what is that difference? And then we've calculated that difference as a %. Those are the only program metrics that we have in the table. The rest of the metrics refer to the department or the unit that is bolded. So again, in this case, Animal and Nutritional Sciences. Scroll over. The next area we have is in this lighter blue color, and this is referring to student credit hours. We have 3 years of data for student credit hours, and this is a capture of a full academic year, so the summer, fall, and spring terms. And we have it for 2020, 2021, and 2022. The fourth column in the student credit hour column is calculating the difference between 2022 and 2020. So how has the student credit hour productivity changed across the 3 years of analysis in the unit? This credit hour capture is all credit hours that were taught by the unit that is under review or that is being reported on here. So again, in this case, animal nutritional science, all of the credit hours taught in the subject codes that are affiliated with that particular department. Whether or not the students who took those classes were majors or non-majors, it all gets captured. And this is a direct relationship to the revenue, which I'll talk about when we get to in a second. The pink or light orange kind of color that you see here in the middle refers to the faculty FTE or full-time equivalencies. We have 2 categories here that we're showing. The first is the tenured and tenure track faculty. We have it for 3 years of data. This is coming from what is called your Hep C freeze file. So the data that gets reported to the state that captures your total faculty and staff counts on an annual basis. This capture is a snapshot. It's taken in the fall, and it's consistent year over year. So while it is not a holistic full count, this is very normal in higher education data from a personnel perspective. Personnel records are live and active and change every day. So we kind of have to take a picture at one point in time and then compare year over year at that same point in time. And that's what this file does. So it shows your tenured and your tenure track faculty. These are only full-time faculty. It doesn't include any temporary faculty or adjunct faculty or clinical faculty, only includes instructional and research faculty. And then we have your total faculty FTE. So the same notes apply there. It's only instructional and research full-time faculty. But what we've done in the second categorization of faculty compared to the first is we've added in your non-tenure track full-time faculty. So the faculty counts and the total faculty FTE reflect both your tenure track and non-tenured full-time instructional and research faculty. And in the last column for faculty, we showed the total change. So comparing the 2023 number to the 2020 number, has the faculty in the unit changed over time? And if so, in which direction? Moving over now, I'll talk about our 2 faculty ratios. So the first faculty ratio is calculating the median of all majors in the unit from 2018 to 2022. So capturing the fall enrollments for all students in the major across all 5 years of data. We do that to smooth out any trends. A number of programs had some pretty significant trends over this time period. So I want to smooth that trend and then compare it to basically the current faculty utilization that's available within the unit, just to see how many majors on average using this metric are being served by a faculty member. And it's calculating, again, all majors, so graduate and undergraduate. The second metric is used to understand how much resources from a faculty perspective does a unit have available to support students at the PhD level, the doctoral level. This was a helpful metric to understand overall capacity to support healthy PhD programs in light of the R1 mission, in addition to the research productivity or the research revenue data that we had to compare it to. So this is taking the median of your total doctoral PhD students from 20 to 22 and dividing that by the median of your total tenure and tenure track faculty from 20 to 22. The medians for these for non-HSC units are noted above. HSC, we did not calculate a median for, given some of the variability across the schools within the Health Science Center, but you can see all those notes in the data definitions as well. I'll now move to the financial data. So as I mentioned, student credit hours become important when we're looking at net tuition revenue. Tuition revenue is generated at the course level. It's basically taking the individual student record and what the student actually paid, and net any of their scholarships and discounts, and dividing what they paid across all the courses that they took in a given year. And then we roll all of that data up by subject code, and then it gets assigned to the individual departments based on that subject code mapping to the department or the unit level. So again, the credit hours are important here. And then you'll notice when you look through this data that revenue trends will follow most typically your credit hour trends in most cases. We have this data for 2020 to 2022, and then we're noting the change from 22 to 20 in revenue in that last column on the revenue side. We next get into expenses. Expenses are coming directly from your general ledger data, and they're affiliated with, I'm going to use a technical term here, your D parents and your DA parents. So folks who are more familiar with the financial data side there, it's basically the unit or the cost center that is affiliated with the academic unit, the department or the school. In some cases, there are more than one. That gets mapped to the unit or department, and all of those expenses roll up for that unit. And here we're looking exclusively at unrestricted operating expenditures, both on the personnel and non-personnel side. So all of the spending that's affiliated with the particular academic unit that is unrestricted. So it doesn't include any restricted research expenditures or things like that. And we've also added an indirect rate. It varies by year, but it's around 50%. To capture all of the academic spending that happens that is in support of the academic mission of the institution, that is outside of the direct academic departments themselves. So this includes any spending that's happening at the dean's office level, at the school or college level, and anything that's happening at the provost or your associate provost or vice provost levels. Again, there's more detail in the data definitions. We then get into revenue net expenses. So this is simply the revenue on the columns prior subtracted, and then we subtract the expenses from that revenue. And then we see overall if the unit under the unit in the data file is operating at a surplus or at a deficit. If it is operating at a surplus, then the number is not in parentheses. If it is operating at a deficit, it is in parentheses. So that's just a way to indicate a negative number. And then the last column from a data perspective is the external research revenue. This comes from let me get the language exactly right here, the Higher Education Research and Development Survey, which is a way to track actual revenue that's generated by units that are funded from external sources. So those external sources are federal, state, and local governments, as well as businesses and nonprofits. This does not include any institutional funded research. It's just external sources. And we're reporting it here for 2022. And as Mark noted, and as is noted in multiple places, if a unit was generating in excess of $1 million in externally funded research revenue in 2022, the PhD programs within that unit were not flagged as being of concern. The last column is the decision that was made for that unit. Mark, anything else you want me to share here?
I think we're good. Marianne?
I think that's great. Now we want to answer any questions you might have. I would say, Frankie, we've got a hard stop at 5:30. So again, I want to remind folks that we will, if we don't get to your questions today, we will do our very best to respond, after the fact, but we also know that you need time to look at the data and to possibly participate in some of these open sessions this week. So we're open for questions.
Wonderful. Please, if you all will, please raise your hands rather than putting your questions in the chat, and we will take them as they come. Lisa DeBartolomeo.
Hi, I wasn't able to unmute. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
Thanks, Frankie. Wow, that was a lot. That was almost 2 hours. And if we have a hard stop at 5:30, that doesn't give us very much time to ask questions. So I have lots of questions. The one I put in the chat much earlier was for Lou Slimak, dealing with what he presented as a possible revision to the GEF and maybe adding study abroad to that. And I'm really curious how we're going to do that without any funding for international work, for student scholarships, for international education, and most especially given my home Department of World Languages, how we're going to do that when World Languages is particularly being, what's the phrase? looked at for review again?
Well, Lisa, I won't speak to any specific outcome because the review hasn't been performed yet. That will be the job of the task force. What I would say is, again, that the broad goal is to include more experiential learning and service learning type experiences in the Jeff in that category 8. I certainly think something like study abroad would be something we'd want to consider and take a look at. But until the program review has been performed and until that task force gets the particulars and recommendations in front of it, I don't know how we'll proceed with any particular experience. We'll take a look at that in the fall.
And Lisa, relative to your comment about the questions, we are committed to stay on, even if the provost's office, it sounds like they have another commitment, but we can stay on and gather your questions live and pass those on. Dan.
Hey everyone, Dan Totske, Everly College. So my question goes back to a question that was asked earlier in a way, similar to how we're supposed to be sort of how we can advocate for the university when parents, families, students themselves are sort of asking us like, why am I coming to WVU? What's going on here? Especially with the narrative being predominantly negative. I know we say should focus on positives, but one big thing that's sort of been an issue that has been brought up to me quite a bit to ask as we've gone through this process, especially as we've been talking about that we're moving to be a more leaner or smaller university, is what does that mean? What is the specific vision for who WVU will be that the leadership has as a goal or eventual destination? Because we haven't necessarily been told that. We've been told we're going to change. Where are we going? Because that has not been stated specifically. I understand so many things are under review and so on, but to know sort of what's the course that's being charted? Because without that, what are we supposed to be telling people of what's the value add for coming to WVU?
President Gee, do you want to answer that?
Yes, well, I was just going to say, thank you very much for that question. I think that the answer is pretty clear, and that is that we are going to be an institution that is forging into the forefront. And by that, I mean, we have 3 goals. One is the fact that we're going to be very student-centered. And that is one of the things I would encourage all of you to do, is to not only to focus on our student-centeredness, but also to make certain that that our incoming students, our families, and others understand that. I talk about that a lot with our families. Secondly of all, we're going to really reconfirm our self as a land-grant institution. And by that, I mean, we're going to be very oriented toward our community building. I'm going to send out a letter tomorrow in this regard about what our vision is, where we want to be. But our land grantness is very important to us. That's what differentiates us. And by that, I mean, it's how we build our communities. It's how we engage with our state in terms of creating public education, how we create jobs. We have a number of programs. We have instituted our advanced programs. We're attracting new and young people to the state. We want to make certain that all of our students have jobs in West Virginia, even if they come from Alaska or New Jersey. And so we're working very hard on that. And the final thing are, what are the areas that distinguish us? What areas that people want to come here? For example, we know the cybersecurity, we know the national security, we know the forensics, we know the neuroscience, we know that our creative writing programs, all of these are essential components, but they differentiate us from other institutions. And it's that differentiation that is going to be important. We have 355 different majors. We will have fewer than that probably, but what we will have is a more robust set of programs that I think really will be attractive. But in the end, let me come back to it. You heard this from George Zimmerman and others, is that our college going rate is lower. In the state, our college going rate in the Northeast is lower, in the Midwest. All of those are issues that we have to be a compelling part of in order to make certain that our university continues to grow. The other vision is this, and I mentioned Amazon and Microsoft. We have to understand that our competition is much different. We've got to get into micro-credentialing. We've got to get into stackable degrees. We've got to get into a number of programs that allow our students to have experiences outside of the institution. Those will be the vision for us is to be a very clearly focused institution on the things that we do well, the things that we need to do well, and ultimately the opportunity for us to really make a very clear difference in winning the hearts and minds of the people of our state. And if we do that, I think we'll be an institution that is greatly valued. I'll give one last example. We have bought 24 hospitals. We have created a health system that is one of the best in the country in a very short period of time. It's that kind of effort that I think is immensely important for us as a university to differentiate ourselves.
Thank you, President Gee. I just want to remind attendees that you need to be recognized by a senator if you would like to speak. I see 2 attendee hands up. Stefania.
Sorry, Frankie, I actually have a quick follow-up for that. That's okay.
Okay, sorry, sure.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for the answer. I think when we've heard this sort of vision going forward, especially sort of the recommitting to the land grant mission and putting students first, I've been hearing from a lot of people that when we hear this narrative, the implication is that we haven't been doing that. Is that the perspective here? Is that we have not been putting students first and we have not been land grant focused? Because that's sort of the narrative that comes out of that.
No, I think that we've done an excellent job in many ways. What I am saying is that we need to recommit to doing that because a number of institutions have really moved away from that. And I'm talking particularly about the land-grant universities. And 3 years ago, I wrote a book on the future of the land-grant university. We did all sorts of data sets which showed that most land-grant universities have really refocused themselves to try to become like every other institution. And my view is that what will really create a robust West Virginia University is one that really does go back to what Lincoln's vision was. And I think that is going to be an important component of who we are. And, have we been student-centered? I think we have. When I came here in 2014, we had 100 different student groups. We have over 500 now. We have opportunities for students to do a variety of things, but still, the students, when you take a look at the survey, they believe that we still need to do a lot more to engage with them personally and to be engaged with them, not for our convenience, but for theirs. And I hate to use this word, but the students are our customers. And we need to accept that as a responsibility. And I think many of us do. I think that we have a real culture of caring at our institution. But when I say emphasize that again, that is critical to what our future is, and every one of us have a responsibility for
that. Stefania.
Stefania Staniscia, Davis College. So I received several questions from faculty that would like me to raise those questions. They are not related to today's topic, but I still think that it's relevant to ask those questions. And they are questions related to the limited library budget and the impact on WVU faculty and current and prospective students. I have 6 questions. I will try to just condense some of them. So how does WVU plan to successfully educate graduate student and medical students if they cannot access the latest books and journals? and have person responsible for the budget taking into consideration how the lack of access to those educational facility may alter student application to WVU or might encourage current WVU graduate students to transfer elsewhere. And will the lack of WVU faculty access to the most recent books and journals affect WVU research standings? And finally, will person responsible for the WVU budget consider transferring funds currently designated for athletic programs to academic programs, such as the library, in order that the university preserve its reputation as a leader that successfully educates undergraduate, graduate, and medical students?
Stefania, let me try to answer that to the best of my ability. What I would say is that I can't speak specifically to the details of the library budget, although I know that they have been reduced. And I know that we are working with our dean, Dr. Karen Diaz, to identify ways to provide as many materials as possible to our WVU community, whether through our own holdings or through interlibrary loans. And I know that I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to serve most of the needs of our students and our faculty in doing so, but we have a budget challenge and we have to address that. And, you know, we've talked about the impacts that this is going to have on our personnel. And so we're really looking for every opportunity to be efficient, but I do believe that our libraries are going to be doing a very good job and have communicated how they're going to be providing materials that are needed to our students and our faculty.
Yeah, and can I just add to that? I think that is the right question. And Stephanie, I appreciate you. But that's the reason we're being so. That's the reason we're moving so swiftly. This I view is a temporary issue. We have a budget deficit. We're squeezed the damn thing out. Then we are in the capacity of investing and growing our budget again. And that's the reason we're doing it. If we didn't do what we're doing now, our budget deficit would grow. And then we would have even less resources. We would have, it could grow to something like $75 million. And if that is the case, then we're not going to be worrying about library resources because we will have had to do a number of things. We squeeze that budget down deficit right now. We view this as a transition moment for ourselves. Then we can start investing, but this time we'll be investing in those programs that will grow our students, our numbers, the quality of what we're about. And that is the reason we're doing what we're doing right now. Is you've got to think about it as what I guess the physicians would say, short-term pain for a lot of gain, and that's where we're going to be.
And Stefania, I would also say I texted the Dean of Library. She's not on this call, but I would suggest that folks reach out to them directly because I know they've got a plan.
Thank you.
Suzanne.
Hi, thank you, Frankie. This is Suzanne Gosden Kitchen, Chambers College. I had posted a question earlier today in the campus conversation, but it got in right there at the end as we were closing out, so it didn't get a response. I'm going to ask it here. I am mostly concerned about faculty cuts that may be the result of the program reviews that we're going through. I mean, it'd be great to assume that nobody's going to lose their job, but I just don't know what the outcome is going to be, and neither do you all yet. Earlier in faculty senate meetings in April and May, there was a discussion about a holistic review of if folks had to go, we were going to look at a multitude of criteria. And yet in the last campus conversation, there seemed to be a lot of attention really on the discontinuation of contracts as they expired. They just weren't going to be renewed. And so my question is, how are we going to look at faculty terminations, should they occur, what process is it going to be? What criteria are we going to use?
Well, hi, Susan. Suzanne, I will happily answer that question. And then Tracy Morris, I see, is also on the line. And so she can help me in this matter. So for faculty in programs that are subject to the academic program review, we will be evaluating the faculty that either will be RIF'd or non-renewed in accordance with the 3 criteria laid out in BOG Rule 4.7, which is performance, skills and knowledge, and then seniority. We will be looking at performance, documented performance. So that would be their P&T reviews over the last, I believe it's 3 years. And then ranking them anonymously based on that performance. Then we will layer in special skills. The way Tracy always explains this, and I think it's a great way, that if, for example, in world languages, if we needed somebody to teach Aramaic and there's only one person that teaches Aramaic, they would rise to the top of the list because they have a special skill or area of expertise that is needed. And then, of course, we will also look at seniority. Since I was asked this before, I will say in a favorable way, i.e. if you've been here longer, that bodes favorably for you in that manner. The other thing I think is important to add is that deans in our colleges and schools can certainly choose, now I'm talking about for teaching or service track faculty, to non-renew any of those faculty whose contract is ending at any point in time, and that it does not have to be subject to a program review. That has happened since term faculty have existed and will continue to do so. So certainly a dean could make a decision about that separate and apart from the program review process. Tracy, do you have anything to add, or did I misspeak on anything?
No, I think those are the highlights. Suzanne, does that answer?
Yes, thank you both.
There are no hands currently raised. Are there any other questions? Joe Lupo.
Hey, Joseph Lupo from the School of Art and Design. I had, I think, maybe just a couple quick questions about the data and the revenue and expenses data. I was wondering if scholarship money comes into play as tuition or as expenditure. Also, where foundation money, the School of Art and Design, we run off of a significant amount of foundation money, and we were wondering, does that appear in the data, or does that appear as expense, or is that calculated in some way, shape, or form?
Mark or Katie, do you want to answer that? Mark, you want to start?
So I can start, yes. Joe, thanks for the question. With respect to, I think you mentioned first scholarship money. If that scholarship money is backed by real dollars provided by, say, an externally funded scholarship through the foundation, that would be captured under tuition revenue. What we do, though, is we net out any unfunded scholarshiping. So where there's scholarshiping occurring in many forms that is not backed by real dollars, but is essentially, foregone revenue from the university's perspective, tuition revenue, that is netted out from those tuition dollars. So that's how that is treated. So again, we are simply looking at revenue captured throughout the entire year, summer, fall, and spring, as a function of the student credit hours produced, but it's real dollars captured. So any discounting that is occurring, et cetera, that's not backed by real dollars is netted out of that tuition. Was there another component that I'm missing that you were talking about or asking about?
Foundation money, does foundation money go into expenses or revenue?
It only goes into revenue to the degree that it is used to recover, again, scholarshiping or lost tuition revenue on the top of it. So that's where it's brought in. And then it wouldn't necessarily come to bear on the expense side.
That's correct. Yeah. That's a restricted fund most typically, so it would not be on the expense side.
Jenna Martin.
Hi guys. I
I had a question from one of my constituents that was asking when the cuts happen for the RIF in terms of the individual faculty members and staff members, is that determination going to be made by the dean alone, or will it be made by the provost's office or some combination thereof?
Hey, Jenna, how are you?
I'm well, Stephanie. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for your question. That decision will be made in a collaborative effort between the provost office, the dean, and then in relevant areas, the chair of a particular department.
Okay, thank you.
Lindsay.
Hi everyone, Lindsay Reinhardt, Eberly College School of Social Work. A question from one of my faculty constituents who appreciated the presentation on recruitment, but was wondering if we have any information as to when we might have more of a budget for recruitment, as we feel stifled in our ability to recruit for our program given those constraints.
Sharon, do you want to perhaps answer that, or George?
Is the question about when they will receive more budget for recruitment?
I think in general, is that right, Lindsay?
Yes, I mean, not necessarily our school particularly, but it seems that we are limited in our ability to even like digital marketing. I mean, even a very small amount to recruit. And so what are our future plans for that?
Yeah, I think, and I'll have George weigh in as well, but I don't know that I can speak to specific dollars. What I can speak to is partnerships. So what I would like to be able to do is work more closely with your recruitment team, think about how we can do recruitment and marketing together and maybe leverage some of those assets that we have. So I think everyone across the university is of course struggling with a little bit less to work with, but that doesn't mean we still can't achieve our goals. It's just how do we pull those resources together to have a more united front in that recruitment effort. Sorry, but George, I'll let you weigh in as well.
No, I agree with that, Sharon. And we've had meetings with a couple of different college recruitment teams recently. We've worked closely with, Statler and Eberly and others in the past to work with their recruitment teams, both from, digital marketing perspectives with the marketing side of the house, but then also opportunities for partnerships. I think there's a lot of ways that we can recruit that we need to think outside the box in terms of recruitment too. The days of packing up your things and going to a high school, they're over. You can't even get into high schools anymore in a lot of areas of the country because of security measures and background checks and things that need to happen. And so we need to think about new ways of engaging students. So Lindsay, I like your comment about, digital marketing. What are the ways that we can get to the spaces where those students are? We do a lot of that already centrally, and our teams are more than happy to meet with groups in the colleges, people who are interested to figure out what are ways that we can do more to highlight programs and direct students in different ways. So, and we've had some, little successes as well.
Yeah, and George, I'll add that we have worked on a digital ad campaign with Eberly. Yep. So it's not unfamiliar territory for us. We'll be happy to continue to do that.
Absolutely.
Douglas Terry.
Hello, this is Douglas Terry, Beckley campus. I was wondering, to what extent has the program review been conducted on the regional campuses like my own? And looking at the documents so far, I haven't seen like Beckley or Potomac State been like kind of sectioned out. So is, like, for example, my program of English, is that under English in the documents, or is there a further review to be done?
Douglas, I'll answer that. So the answer is we are not currently reviewing the branch campuses. We are focusing on the main campus and of course HSC. Number one, we have new deans who are, trying to wrap their arms around the current budget situation and who already have identified ways to meet their budget reductions. But also we want to do that a little bit later in the coming year to give them time to get their arms around this. But we will be going through a similar review process with the branch campuses. And we will be utilizing the framework provided by RPK to do that process. But I think if you go to the website and you see some of our materials, we say we are not reviewing those campuses at this time. And they also have different missions and different focuses. And so we're treating those differently at this time.
Thank you.
Lisa.
Lisa DiBartolomeo, Eberly College of Arts and Sciences, World Languages, Literatures, and Linguistics. And my question focuses on double majors. And this is a subject that is particularly sensitive for my department, all the programs in my department, and I would be remiss in representing my constituents if I did not raise it. And I know this idea also touches on many, many other regions, areas. Humanities in particular often end up being second majors. Part of what students come to college to do is to explore and to find new areas of passion and interest and study. And essentially, well, I mean, literally what Lou said explicitly this morning was they're nice, second majors, third majors, but they don't count. And they're not value added because they don't bring revenue in specifically, right? So that the only thing that happens is the revenue counts toward the primary major. And my question, and I guess my concern, is that we may be encouraging people to start their own kind of Hunger Games where we are competing with one another. Programs are competing with other programs to steal students, to manipulate students, to tell students, well, you need to list my major first because we need more majors, we need more enrollments. And it just isn't a very realistic way to look at what college means for students, what students come to college to get, and the value that we all add. We're essentially only saying that this one thing matters when there are so many other things that matter. It just seems like an extremely problematic and unrealistic way to determine what counts.
Lou, do you want to respond to that first?
Yeah, I'll repeat what I said just so all the senators who weren't at the meeting this morning can hear it, and then I'll add some context. We counted all majors in certain places, and we only counted primary majors in others. The headcount enrollment is what you're talking about specifically, Lisa, and I would point everyone to the data definitions that Katie pointed out on the Academic Transformation website. For headcount enrollment, we only counted primary majors for the reasons I've been saying for a long time. From the institution's budget model, from the state's budget model, only the primary major counts in terms of generating revenue towards the institution. We then, for revenue generation, when we credit a unit for its revenue generation, we count all students taught, primary, secondary, otherwise. So you do get credit for those double majors elsewhere. Part of what I would also say is that that's the metric we agreed on for this first view, right? If the program comes under review and wants to say we have an additional X amount of double majors, we think you should consider that. That is part of what they can do in their response. And I'm happy to help them get to those numbers and provide that as context for the provost's office and our consideration of their review.
Lou, can I put you on the spot too?
Sure.
How many double majors do we have at the university? Do we have a lot?
No, not by percentage at all. Not a very small number of double majors. And in fact, the programs that would be most affected aren't in the humanities. They're actually in engineering. There's a dual double major program between mechanical and aerospace engineering. And Lisa's right. We don't have a policy for determining how a student assigns its primary major. So right now, those students who come into dual major in aerospace and mechanical get listed as primary in aerospace because it comes first. One of the effects that this review has had is that in policy committee, the academic policy committee coming this fall, will review and determine a policy to how a student selects their primary major, so that it's at least based upon the student's interest if they were to have to make a choice at some point for financial aid reasons, for degree completion reasons.
Thanks, Lou. Mark, do you want to add anything? about the data?
No, other than this is an example of where questions come up and we can make improvements in data, we're going to seek to do so. So this question did come up already today in campus conversation, and we're already having internal discussions about how we can bring that double major data into our data set and have it available as we evaluate programs. And we'll get better at that. I will go back to what Lou said, which is its effect is going to be concentrated in certain places more than others. And in the grand scheme of things, we don't have a lot of those type of majors. So their absence right now is not really overly concerning, but it is something that we do need to bring into the data.
May I follow up really quickly? I'm sorry, Dan and Tamba. I'm not quite sure that I agree with the contention that we don't have a lot of double majors. I would really love to see some of the data there. And I know certain departments are second majors or third majors more often than others. And my department happens to be one of those. Very few of our majors within world languages are single majors, right? There aren't a lot of people who are only Spanish majors and who are not international studies and Spanish majors, for instance. So I think even though it may not touch all programs equally, I think this is something that for certain programs deserves to be examined. Thanks for letting me follow up.
And Lisa, if we add that to the data set, everyone will be able to see what those, kind of where we have those double majors. So thanks for bringing that up.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to let Tamba go since you've had one chance, and then I'll come right back to you.
Is it my turn?
It is indeed.
Okay, Tamba Mbayo, Ebali College of Arts and Sciences. So far, there has not been any discussion about the impact of this budget cut and the transformation on international students in terms of both recruitment and retention. And I was wondering whether someone could speak to that, and how is WVU going to perhaps rebrand itself to continue appealing to international students, given all the financial constraints that we are going through?
I'm going to call on George to talk about our international strategy.
Sure. So in terms of some of the things that I mentioned today, I would like to call out that the new scholarship strategy specifically supports international students in the same way as it supports our domestic students. And so that's something that we have definitely focused on in terms of understanding that the time frame where we had a large number of sponsored students, particularly those from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia coming to the university, has gone. Those programs don't exist anymore. They've been eliminated by the governments in many countries. And we had quite a few years where we got a lot of students from there. What we are seeing now are students that are looking to come to the United States, and particularly for programs at WVU that may have some more financial need. And so we are including them just as we would any other non-resident student in those particular scholarships. From a international recruitment strategy, we have looked at a variety of different opportunities. Some of those are 2+2 programs, so combined programs. The Chambers College, I think, is a great example of some of the things that they have done. I know Davis has explored this as well as some other areas to see what are some complementary programs that we can do with schools perhaps in China or Korea or other areas where it's 2 years in country and 2 years here at the university. What we do then see is those students can tend to stay on for graduate programs in a lot of cases. And so there's different benefits for the recruitment in that factor. In terms of traditional first-time freshmen, we're refocusing efforts, as a lot of other institutions are in India, as one of our primary markets, as well as sub-Saharan Africa, because we do get a lot of student interest from those areas as well. China will be going through enhanced demographic drop of the likes that I think people have not seen in many years from a student and college going perspective. And we've already struggled undergraduately in China, and with a market that's contracting, it makes more sense for the university to look and invest in other areas of the globe, not ignore China, but think of different strategies like those 2+2s to bring in students, second, third tier city engagements. Now, international travel will be something that obviously due to the pandemic has not happened for a while. Partnerships and from international travel is going to be key. So as we are able to move through this budget crisis and there are opportunities for faculty and staff and others to engage internationally again, please, partnerships with Central Recruitment and Office of Global Affairs are encouraged. We have a program where we can help train faculty members who are going abroad with what some of the recruitment messaging materials that they would need, who they should be in contact with if they have students who are interested, and what are the best ways to use time from a recruitment perspective so we can maximize people's time in market. So that's a little bit of where we're going. I'm happy to talk more about international strategy with anyone who's interested, because there's a lot more that we are doing from both a virtual perspective as well as in-market recruitment, but I know we have limited time here today.
Question that I think that the issue of international students is incredibly important. The pandemic was a great problem for that, and then obviously our problems with China, some of the international issues that we've had to deal with, and then in the Middle East they have really limited the number of students that they're sending to American universities now. And if you went to Dammam in Saudi Arabia, it was one of the largest alumni groups of the university anywhere, because we trained a vast number of the petroleum engineers for Saudi Aramco, but that is now no longer the case. So we've had to revisit our strategies. But to answer to a question about vision earlier, that's what I mean by the stackable credentials, the 2+2, a variety of other things. That's how we will start being very attractive to international students, providing opportunities for them to come in different kinds of configurations.
Thank you very much.
You. Dan.
Thanks, Dan Tatsuke, Eberly College. So I've gotten some questions from constituents about one of the metrics used for programs that were put under review with the faculty to student ratio. So I was hoping that someone could speak to the sort of that metric. It seems like that if there is a high faculty to student ratio, that's the preferred, and programs were cited as having a low faculty to student ratio as a reason for their review. Maybe it's just a matter of making sure that that term is defined. It was sort of implied that, well, lower, you'd think a faculty to fewer students is good because there's more, energy focus on more condensed students. So if someone could speak to that and clarify, that would be very helpful.
You want to start, Mark?
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Let me start, and I address this in a little more detail in the campus conversation today, but that is one way of looking at efficiency, right? It is a way, it's not the way to look at efficiency. And we've defined it as looking at efficiency and delivering instructions to majors, right? So it's to all your majors, or in the second case of the metric, it's as isolated to doctoral students and teaching them. The reality is this, and we noted that while it can be informative, it's not definitive. We need context around that. So, it is not as if we defined a university median at the undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral levels, but whether a program is above or below that, while that is, a quick and easy judgment to make, whether that's an appropriate level is one of context, and we need to consider that. So you go into certain programs and being below, say, an 18 or 19 to 1 for all majors makes perfect sense because of the nature of the discipline, or maybe it's accreditation standards that cause it to be limited to a certain ratio. Those are contextual factors that we need to take into account during the review process. So I don't want to come right out of the gate, and this is the point on the metrics. The efficiency ones are one example. These are things that catch our attention, not things that automatically say this defines a problematic program. It's simply a metric that says we need to better understand this. Is this ratio appropriate? And is it sustainable? We can ask those kinds of questions, but it starts by looking at where you sit on those efficiency metrics to begin to start the process of taking a look and understanding context a bit more. So don't come, I don't want anybody to come right out of the gate and think that automatically low ratios are inherently bad. They're just something that need to be looked at more to understand them. Lou or Katie, do you want to chime in on that as well? Or
no, I think you said it well. It was one metric among many that were used in the review process.
I think I see 2 hands up, and Frankie, we should probably answer those questions and then wrap it up on our end.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh, great. We'll do it. We'll do it, Amy. Great.
Okay, Scott.
Hi, Scott Critchlow at Eberly College. First off, I want to say I really appreciate y'all putting all that information online this morning. It's been very helpful for conversations we've had today amongst ourselves, our faculty colleagues, as well as the fellow senators. But something that's come up is that I think a lot of folks were surprised by the number of programs that are on the list for review. And I think that's kind of added to people's uncertainty basically about, I think in a way we're very pleased about the holistic nature of the review, but considering the different kinds of data and the very, very high number of disparate programs that are being looked at, I was wondering if you could give us any sort of signs about which seem to be particularly important metrics. I mean, so this morning, Mark and Lou, you both said that sort of the absolute key things seem to be about revenue and costs, which makes sense given our financial considerations. But so, and I get that y'all are not going to commit to anything today. That's fine, understandable. But as we look at the different columns, are there different columns? And I don't know if y'all would look at this differently across different parts of the university, but generally speaking, are there different columns that might guide how you're going to choose out of that 48%, which programs to really take a really hard look at?
Let me just answer Scott very quickly, and then just see if the team wants to answer. I mean, it is a holistic look. There are many, as you noted, many types of data that we're looking at. I mean, I would tell you that student demand is really a key component, and student demand also impacts revenue. So it's particularly noteworthy if a program has very low enrollments and or has significant declines in enrollment that are greater than the university as a whole. That does not mean those other factors are not important, but I think that is the first flag, and it is what caught our attention immediately. Does the team want to add to that?
I was just going to add beyond what Mark had already said this morning about a holistic review, that there may be some markers for some programs in a unit. That's where, as when the letters went out to those units, Scott, they explained like these were the department metrics that were flagged. These were the individual program metrics that were flagged. So as units go to respond, they're not responding for every program, every metric. They're going to be able to focus their efforts on the departmental metrics and the specific questions we have for some of their programs.
Yeah, I think, and I'll add on to that just a tad bit, and that is that we wrestled with that at the front end of this about how we might weight criteria and if we would, and I think the quick answer came that we didn't want to at this point. So there is no one column that's going to dominate, but I think as Provost Reed suggested, you can't ignore enrollment trends. And again, to be clear, it's not that a small enrollment program is automatically going to be considered for cutting, but you have to ask the question, is it appropriate? Can it be sustained? And then I would add in on top of that, at the unit level, there are a lot of things that we can consider. At one level, those financial data become really important. As we think about the net financial position that's represented in the data, I also want to be clear. I'm not the decision maker here. This is top leadership's purview, but in understanding how they approach this, I think it's safe to say, there's a program that is generating a net loss isn't automatically going to be cut. I think a natural question would be, could we do it a little more efficiently to minimize the loss? But there are plenty of things at universities that are going to generate net negative revenue, right? You have to carry them. They're subsidized. I think, President Gee, Provost Reed have been clear all along that one of the things we've learned is we subsidize a lot of things at the university, and we can't continue to subsidize at the same level we have. So we're going to have to start making choices about what we subsidize and what we don't. But even as we subsidize perhaps a smaller number of things, there will be choices about what we subsidize, but they have to be subsidized by something. So we have to balance our portfolio out. You know, things that are important to us that we're going to continue to operate at a loss, well, those have to be offset by things that are bringing revenue in the door. And I think that's the bigger challenge when we're looking at this portfolio. So that's what kind of begs us to stay away from overweighting or weighting any one category more than the others, is we have to think about this in a holistic fashion, because those are the kinds of decisions we're facing. President Gee, Provost Reed, if that was if you think differently on that answer, please, correct me.
I thought it was excellent.
I think you're perfect.
That's very, very thorough. Appreciate that. All right. I think we've got two more questions, Frankie.
Hyland Lee, please.
Okay, Hyland Lee from Engineering College. We heard the good things the university talked about the recruiting. And one thing from what we heard from China, from other countries, the many students are not willing to come to us is because our ranking keep going down and not good. And what I like to see, or many of my colleagues here like to hear from university, what we are going to do to improve or bump out our ranking or the quality overall in US or in this world. So many graduate students from other countries, we know they are not coming. When we talk to them, they say, Hyland, too bad. Their ranking is not over, 250 or better. And what we are going to do to improve our quality, or what we are going to do to stop further declining in our quality side?
I think, Gordon, are you getting ready to answer that?
Well, I would just say, first of all, let me just say that you're talking to a guy who doesn't believe in rankings. I believe in quality. And, I always point out to the fact that U.S. News has been the greatest detriment to quality education in this country. And there's a lot of data that shows that now a number of institutions are leaving the ranking business. The truth of the matter is, even on U.S. News, our overall ranking has risen, and I don't necessarily take a lot of note about that. But I think what we have to do, there are certain places, China being one of them, some of the Middle Eastern countries that look at some of the rankings. And so what we have to do is we have to go and do some of the things that we have. We have visited with ambassadors, or we visited with the high-ranking officials in Washington about some of the specific programs that we do that are very unique, and those are the ones that we'll probably start to recruit toward. But I always note the fact that there's never been a public university in this country that's ever been ranked in the top 20 by U.S. News and World Report, and that just shows the quality of the place. So I know you can all talk about it, and you can generate interest in that area, but rankings is not our problem. Our problem is making certain that we have programs that people demand and want to come toward, and that will be our solution.
Thank you, President Gee. Amy.
Yeah, thanks everybody for hanging on the call. And I waited till the bitter end in intentionally pulling the ultimate academic move because I have more of a comment than a question. Insert your groans here. But if there's a time to bring this to light, I'd really like to have the opportunity to have a brief acknowledgement, and this gets at what we were just speaking to a little bit earlier about what we subsidize and what we don't, right? We have this land grant mission that we're here to serve. And so in this public forum, I wanted to bring up where we are in terms of the fact that even if, the way I understand it is, even if all of our programs were to break even, we still would have a structural budget deficit because of the debt we're carrying and the principal that we need to pay and the interest, and to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars. And this is on top of the fact that we're, as George showed earlier, we're not reaching everybody that we could in our state. The financial barriers are keeping high school graduates who have aptitude from becoming mountaineers, right? And then that's a problem that clearly also we could work to address. And the other issue, before I kind of get to my main point, is that the things we subsidize through the university pay out in a return on investment that's seen in our communities. We get better health outcomes, we get greater rates of happiness, we get a stronger tax base. All of these things are never going to show up in the university budget. And so that part of the budget is the piece I wanted to focus on. And I actually invited somebody to come and speak or share just a brief overview. Kelly Allen from the West Virginia Center for Budget and Policy is an attendee. And I had asked Frankie earlier if it would be okay for her to make a very short statement in terms of the landscape that we're facing, where we have this debt that we're basically is digging us a hole, and then the decrease in funding from higher education, or I'm sorry, from the state legislature, that is also kind of creating this hole that we basically are starting behind. We're starting off in the red as just from the get-go. And I feel like that hurdle is going to just further leave behind the students that we are still not succeeding in serving, the students who don't have the financial resources. The people who benefit the most from public higher education are the ones who aren't in the upper middle class, right? The ones who are in the upper middle class, they clearly see the value of higher education. They're going to college, they're getting those degrees, and they actually benefit the least, and they should see the smallest return on investment from that effort. So I kind of want to just turn the focus on to what we can do better, perhaps, that would serve the people of our state who have built this university. As my former colleague Ken Martis would always say, look at this fabulous institution that the taxpayers have created here. And this is coming from a concern of just really not wanting to see that be diminished in any way because of the returns that it gives to our state and its communities. So I don't know. I know people are going to leave. Frankie, I'll leave it up to you if it's okay to recognize Kelly at this point.
Amy, as I said to you in the emails, you were free as a senator to recognize an observer, but we're not in a position to have an observer present.
No, she wouldn't present. She'll just speak. Yeah, it wouldn't be a presentation.
That's your prerogative, and I don't know what the provost office team's situation is. They're 5 minutes past when they said they had a hard stop, but I mean, it's your prerogative to recognize an observer if you'd like to do that.
Okay, well then I think...
Can I just interrupt for 1 minute? Amy, I know you raised a question about our debt burden, and I just want to make sure we're clear about that. Can we take a moment, and can I ask Rob Alsop just to respond to that, just to make sure you have accurate information? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Hey, Rob, can I call on you?
Sure can. Thank you, Marianne, and thank you, Amy. So I've actually been working. One of the things that Frankie asked from our team was a fully detailed analysis as it relates to our debt portfolio. And so we are close to having that to provide. The information that will be provided is the list of all of our outstanding debt, our public debt, our private debt, and private debt, public bonds, private bonds, and then any private loans that we have, as well as their interest rates and the projects that they went for. And so, like we have to invest in a number of things at the institution, we also have to take care of our capital infrastructure. If you don't, as buildings age, they get more expensive and they outlive their utility. And so when you look at our overall debt ratios compared to our peers, we are pretty competitive and comparable to the ratings that the bond houses have provided to us. And as you look around our campus, you see a number of things that we have invested in to help to provide top-notch facilities for our faculty, for our staff, for our research capabilities. And those buildings that enable that activity do cost money. And we took example over the past really 15 years, starting before 2014, 2015, to begin to make some of those investments for our campus. And so you look all around at Reynolds Hall, and you look at the renovations in Hodges Hall, or what's happening at Chitwood. You look at the new building for the Davis College and what it did with respect to their labs. The new building that was for CPAS, it's now the home for CAHS, and what that did. You look at all around the campus, the infrastructure upgrades that have taken place at the Health Science Center all go towards that. And, I think if I'm not mistaken, Brooks, I mean, that's been a building that's been renovated. There was debt issued to take care of that renovation so that you have facilities that are sufficient moving forward. And so what I would tell you is we will provide that information by project. You look at the interest rate that is on most of that debt. It's over 98% fixed at a very low interest rate. And it enables a lot of the activity that goes on at the institution moving forward. And so it is, I think it is fair game to talk about our overall budget and our ratios, but we will be providing a lot of information as it relates to each of those debt issuances and the projects that they've funded. So that'll be coming very soon. And I appreciate the question. It's a very good one.
Well, yeah, there was no intent to critique the debt and where, but it's a reality, right? I mean, it's a part of the hole that we're trying to dig out of that is what means we can't keep everything that we have had in the past, so that's just, I wasn't trying to critique the debt itself. But can I acknowledge, or can I welcome the guest at this point?
Yes, and I don't see anyone named Kelly Allen in the attendees list. Does your guest have a different name?
Oh, sorry, it's the WV, where'd you go? WV.
Their hand is raised.
Okay, yeah.
Like me to unmute them so they can speak.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, please.
All right, you can unmute yourself now.
Hi there. Thanks, Amy. Can folks hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks, Amy, for inviting me to tune into the meeting today. I'm the executive director of the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. We do nonpartisan research and analysis of the state budget and its impact on folks across West Virginia. So Amy asked me to talk a little bit about the impact of reduced state funding on the current situation at WVU, and I was glad to hear President Gee and others mention it throughout the conversation today. I would never suggest that state funding is the only factor in the situation that WVU is currently in, and of course I don't know all the ins and outs of WVU's budget, but we can very clearly see that state funding for higher education has not kept pace with inflation, and we're seeing budget impacts across colleges and universities statewide, with none more visible than that here at WVU. When accounting for inflation, state funding for higher ed is down about 24% since 2013. That's tens of millions of dollars each year at West Virginia University specifically. It's simply true that had the state maintained 2013 levels of funding for higher ed in the general revenue budget, WVU would have, somewhere around an additional $30 million in its budget this year. I was really struck by the demographic information that was shared earlier with West Virginia's college-going rates declining, particularly with low-income students. And I think this is just a concrete example of where we can see the impact of reduced state funding. Tuition has risen significantly. The value of things like the Promise Scholarship has declined very much in tandem with enrollment trend changes, with reduced state funding for higher education. And that's deeply impacted low-income students and families over this period. Enrollment trends, while some are beyond our control, they're not like the weather. We do have some power over impacting them, especially as they apply to equity of who can afford and access higher education. And just back to the budget quickly, as President Gee mentioned earlier, higher ed is the first thing on the chopping block when times are tough at the state legislature. We saw this after the high water mark back in 2013 with reductions in state funding in the following years when the state was facing significant budget holes in 2016, 2017. But it's important to say a lot of that budget shortfall at the state level was self-inflicted by lawmakers, driven by hundreds of millions of dollars in tax cuts phased in over that period. And since higher ed is the first thing to be cut in economic downturns for the state, ideally that funding is restored when state revenues and the economy recover. But we've not seen that in the past couple of years. Instead, we've seen a commitment to a flat state budget from our legislators, meaning no ability to restore or send new funding to our public institutions like WVU. Instead of restoring funding to our colleges and universities in what has been touted as the best economic year in state history, the biggest budget surplus ever, WVU and other higher ed institutions again saw flat general revenue allocations. And I say this to say a concern and really a warning to you all is that it could and it will get worse if lawmakers don't change course. As far as state revenues this fiscal year that just ended, the stars were aligned. Everything that contributes to state revenues was positive. Our three biggest sources of state revenue are the income tax, the sales tax, and the severance tax. Energy prices were high this year. That's good for the severance tax. Inflation was high. That's good for the sales tax. Unemployment was low. That's good for income tax. So this was a year that was great for tax collections. Higher ed should have seen restoration of funding levels. So it's scary to think that if revenues come back down, that things could get worse. And we're already seeing those start to come back down. The legislature again chose to undermine revenues with big tax cuts that reduced the personal income tax, which up until now has made up over 40% of our general revenue budget. So again, I don't suggest that state funding is the whole story here, but I do warn that it could get worse. And it's really important for all of us to make sure our decision makers understand both the short and long-term community value of our strong institutions that Amy was talking about, the things that don't show up in these reports, but we know improve the quality of life and the economy for folks all over our state. Thank you.
Kelly. Are you still, Amy? I'm sorry, I don't see you. Would anyone like to respond to Amy? And her, yes, she deferred to, yielded to.
I don't think so today, Frankie. But we appreciate that information.
Thank you, Marianne. Okay. At this time, I don't see any more hands. Of course, there is contact us on the Faculty Senate website. Feel free to go there, click on that, send any concerns you have. You can email me. And we are taking forward every question that we get. You can also, of course, ask questions on your own through the routes you have. So I also would like to say at this point that we encourage senators to reach out to your constituencies. We have a lot of our faculty are off contract. We understand that, but this self-study program department review is critical, and it's critical that the faculty voice be included in that. I hope the resolution we passed today will give you some good traction in areas where you may not have the door quite as open as you would hope. But I really would like to encourage you to reach out to your faculty. I know people are not on contract, but we need their voices. So the engagement and responsiveness and participation of faculty in this process is critical, and you can really help that process happen. Thank you, Provost Reed and team. Is there any new business? Thank you. Hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Dinah. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.